IVM.
Hi, I'm Satyajit.
Hi, I'm Racheta.
Welcome to Paperback by the Open Library Project.
We have as our guest today Shayamal Vallabhjee, sports scientist, performance psychologist, biohacker and monk. In this episode, we discuss the Bhagavad Gita. Shayamal lived in a temple for 4 years and studied the scriptures and shares the essence of the book with us today.
In the second half, we also discuss The Happiness Hypothesis by Jonathan Haidt, Biology of Belief by Dr. Bruce Lipton, and Hit Refresh by Satya Nadella.
Shayamal discusses his experiences learning the scriptures of the Gita, basic instincts versus rational thinking, companionate love versus passionate love, his bigger purpose as a sports scientist, among other things.
Happy listening.
The principle called negative bias shows up all over psychology. In material interactions, it takes at least 5 good or consecutive actions to make up for the damage of one critical or destructive act. In financial transactions or gambles, the pleasure of gaining a certain amount of money is smaller than the pain of losing that same amount. In evaluating a person's character, people estimate that it would take 25 acts of life-saving heroism to make up for one act of murder. When preparing a meal, food is often contaminated by a single cockroach antenna, but difficult to purify. Over and over again, psychologists find that the human mind reacts to bad things more quickly, strongly, and persistently than equivalent good acts. We can't just will ourselves to see everything good because our minds are wired to find and react to threats, violations, and setbacks.
Thank you, Shayamal Vallabhjee. That was an excerpt from the book The Happiness Hypothesis by Jonathan Haidt. We'll be right back after this to discuss the book in more detail.
How many times have you motivated yourself to improve your sleep, or lose weight, or be more productive? How many times have you failed? Hi, my name is Ashton Doctor. Tune into my show, The Habit Coach Podcast, where we focus on creating small, tiny habits to improve your life instead of those big, impossible tasks. So make listening to me a habit every Monday, Wednesday and Friday on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com or on your favorite podcasting app.
Welcome to Paperback by the Open Library Project. I am your co-host Satyajit, otherwise known as Onion Knight in most food circles. I'm hosting this podcast with my co-founder at the Open Library Project, Racheta Sharma.
Hi guys, my name is Racheta. I'm an ex-banker who gave up my banking profession to follow my passion and run libraries across the world. The Open Library Project is a non-fiction book library service offered to businesses on a subscription basis. We're trying to move away from the run-of-the-mill library concept by setting up rotational and locational curated libraries at co-working spaces, corporates, and business incubators. The idea here is to create value, build a knowledge community, and encourage a growth mindset amongst our members.
Today we have with us on the show Shayamal Vallabhjee. Shayamal is a South African-born sports scientist, performance psychologist, and biohacker with over 18 years of experience working with elite athletes and business leaders. His approach to optimizing performance blends science and spirituality. The author of 4 books on sports science and motivation, a TEDx speaker, Inc. and Australia India Youth Fellow, an entrepreneur and motivational speaker. He dreams that he can touch the lives of 1 million children by making sport an equal opportunity platform devoid of politics, religion, race, gender, or socio-economic bias. Welcome to the show, Shayamal.
Thank you very much for having me here.
Thank you for being here. And you have a very interesting choice of books. So in our previous episode also, we've spoken about a lot of books which talk about, using religion in
science.
Combination with probably science to sort of center your life. So tell us, what stands out for you the most about the Bhagavad Gita. Now, our listeners don't know this, but you've been, studying the scriptures for about 4 years in a temple. And what really stood out for you in this process?
So I moved into the ashram many years ago. I think it was at the end of 2003. I grew up in South Africa.
Okay.
And South Africa, I grew up during, I wanted to play sport during an apartheid era.
Okay.
And I was pretty good at cricket.
Okay.
But because of the apartheid era,
Right.
opportunities were very restricted for people of color.
Right.
And I had to immediately, at the age of 18, pretty much retire. And that's where I decided to study sort of sports science or sports medicine.
Okay.
And I immediately got the opportunity to work with professional athletes. So I was working with state teams, national academies, national teams at that age. And 3 or 4 years later, the bitterness of the apartheid, the bitterness of having not had the opportunity to play for my country or even be given a chance to see if I was good enough, that bitterness had not left me, and I didn't like the type of person I was becoming.
Right.
Now, I grew up in a very spiritual family,
Right.
okay, and the natural inclination, like for many other people, is when you're in a time of difficulty and you look to introspect, you go towards a spiritual grounding for that guidance, and I did exactly that. I decided to move into an ashram. It wasn't a decision to move in full time. I just went in there one night and just to spend the night there because I wasn't feeling too well, and mentally I just needed some quiet.
Okay.
And because I enjoyed it, one day became the next, and a week, and a month, and before long I'd been staying there for a considerable amount of time, for almost 3.5 years.
Wow.
And part of that process, I went into the temple to find myself, to find calm within, because I didn't want situations that were beyond my control to change who I was as a person.
Right.
Yeah.
And when you move into the temple, the process is very rigorous, which I wasn't aware of at that time. You wake up at 3:30 a.m. every single morning. Okay, you get into the temple at 4. You're meditating from 4 to about 6:30.
Right.
Okay, then you do a morning arti, a Mangal arti. Then you go into what's called a Bhagavatam or a Bhagavad Gita class. So you're studying from about 7:30 to about 9:30.
Okay.
Okay.
Then you go and have breakfast, and then you start preaching. So you leave the temple and you go out and you're preaching these scriptures, everything that you learned.
Okay.
You have 2 meals. You have a 9 o'clock breakfast and a 2 o'clock lunch. Very often I missed lunch because I was out. And when you come back, you would sleep by 7, 8 because you're waking up at 3
3:30
in the morning.
Yeah.
So, so the temple was it was a beautiful and a difficult experience, because one is you cultivating the discipline of waking up.
Right.
Yeah.
You're now living in a room with 15 other devotees, so you can't behave whatever you want, however you
Right.
want to. You got to get to bed at the same time. You got to wake up at the same time. You've got to attend class and you've got to study it, because you are now, when you put on your cloth and when you wear your tikka, you become a representation of that organization.
Right.
So you have to abide by the rules of that organization.
Right.
And through that 3.5 years, we studied obviously the Bhagavad Gita. That is the main book that we look at. We studied the Srimad Bhagavatam, and we study along the lineage of someone called Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, okay, who was an ancestor or a descendant of Sri Krishna.
Okay.
Okay. And you learn to cultivate different values, and through that entire process, what I realized was it changed my life. Okay, learning the Bhagavad Gita, living the ashram, taught me that there is no message on earth worth saying that cannot be said without love and compassion. And that was the most important lesson that I've ever learned in my life, and it's carried me strong for many years.
Wow, that sounds like an amazing lesson. I think a lot of the learnings or the knowledge would have come through time, right? It would have taken a certain amount of time through rigorous practice, and that's when you sort of
totally.
had an internal enlightenment, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, everything happens with time.
Right.
You know, I tell people, and I work with professional athletes, so I bring a lot of the learnings from spirituality into how I work with athletes.
Right.
And discipline is the process of sticking to something long enough for it to break you before it makes you.
Okay.
So I woke up at 3:30 a.m. every single morning. For the first 6 months, I was falling asleep in the temple. Right, because mentally I was not prepared to wake up at 3:30. Mentally I resisted and resisted and resisted, and I didn't want to be there. But I had to be there because I lived in a room with 10 other people who had to be there, and they woke me up. And after 6 months, I'm sitting there one morning, and I realized that, Shayamal, you've done this for 6 months. You have to, as long as you're living here, you're going to have to do this. And if you're going to have to wake up, you might as well be mentally present here.
Yeah.
Right. And when I made that decision, then I woke up fresher, I was more alert, and then the quality of my meditation improved every single one. But the discipline of waking up every single day at 3:30 is what will actually bring you to that point of realization. Most people don't have the mental strength to stick to a process long enough for it to break you.
Right.
That process broke me before it actually made me.
Okay. Yeah.
That's wonderful, and there's a lot of clarity in your thoughts, which is visible when someone sees you. But do tell us that, what are the lessons that would really stand out for a person who is not very religious or an atheist. Why should they be reading the Bhagavad Gita?
The Bhagavad Gita it's a beautiful book. It has many lessons and many stories in it. But I tell you, for someone who is not Hindu, or someone who is maybe even atheist or doesn't have any religion, one of the most important lessons that stood out for me was the Bhagavad Gita is an extract. It is between chapters 23 to 40 of the Mahabharata.
Yeah.
So it's taken out as an extract. It's a conversation between Krishna and Arjuna. Right.
Yeah.
And what is the most important thing? Before you even start with the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna had met Arjuna many, many years before that. They were very good friends. He was very good friends with the Pandavas.
Yeah.
And that's why they were there.
Yeah.
And throughout this entire time, Krishna never gave any advice. He was there. He listened, he watched, he observed. Arjuna went into battle thinking he knew what it was. And there was a point in time, just before the battle started, when Arjuna looked up and he didn't know what to do because he saw his family on the other side.
Yeah.
He was scared.
Yeah.
He didn't know how to react. Should I kill them? Shouldn't I kill them? Now, there are two important things here. One is that Arjuna was not scared because of incompetence. He was one of the most competent warriors on that battlefield.
Right.
His skill was far superior than anyone else on it.
Yeah.
Right? Yet he had doubt. So the doubt wasn't born from fear.
Yeah.
Doubt is born from his purpose on earth.
Yeah.
Okay. But more important than that is what? Is that Krishna only spoke when Arjuna asked him to teach him. And I tell people that before you even deep dive into the Bhagavad Gita, this is what you need to realize. That up until the point where you come to a place of surrender and you ask for assistance, guidance will not come.
Right.
The universe is there to guide you, but it will only guide you once you surrender. Because we all have free will. We all have the ability to make decisions. And as long as you're exercising that ability to make decisions, you're limiting your guidance. It's only when Arjuna surrendered, did Krishna speak and guide him. And he didn't just take 5 minutes. He took a long time. He took 700 verses, of which 596 are spoken by Krishna. Only 76 are spoken by Arjuna. So he took a long time and he explained to him in detail what the purpose of this life is. And there's a later on in that battle, Arjuna lost his son. And once again, he put his arms down. And Krishna told him, once again, you're getting confused. You're getting confused by your identity here. You are seeing the body and you're not seeing the soul. And even there, see, it's so important. Before even the first word is spoken, you have to realize Arjuna is asking Krishna for guidance, Krishna is guiding him.
Right.
Yeah.
The fact that he took 596 verses means that the universe is patient with you. It will explain it in a way that you understand.
Yeah.
And later on, when he got stuck, it stopped again and he spoke again.
Right.
He guided him again. It's realizations like this that we need to understand, isn't it? It's the same in all religions. Okay, if you look at Christianity, Jesus carried his own crucifix on his own back. You understand?
Right.
It's very significant on the fact that we have to carry our own load and our own burdens to the end.
Right.
Yes.
At that point in time, somewhere along that road, Solomon came and helped him for a little while.
Right.
Solomon carried that crucifix for a little while, but then Christ said to them, carry it again. Because even when someone comes and helps us with our burdens, it's our burden to carry.
Right.
Yeah.
And his last words before he left his body was what? He said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. What was his last word? His last words, he was reminding us, is forgiveness is the most important quality of a human being.
Right.
Until you don't learn to forgive, you will be stuck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Now, these are beautiful examples. You don't even have to know anything about the Bible. You don't even have to know anything about the Gita.
Yeah.
These are just such simple things. You just have to understand these words and deep dive into them, and you will unlock its beauty.
Yeah, it's a culmination of, just devotion and surrendering, submission of your self and, finding a bigger purpose.
Finding a bigger purpose, correct.
Unconditional love for a spiritual soul. So, very, very beautifully written. And the dialogue between Krishna and Arjun is very beautiful. So
yes.
Yeah.
So did you study it in the original form, in the original text?
So
or was it?
I was in the temple, in an ISKCON temple.
Okay.
It's called Sri Sri Radha Radhanath in Durban, South Africa. The Bhagavad Gita version that we read is called the Bhagavad Gita as it is.
Okay.
And the description in it is called a purport, which was written by the founder of the organization called Srila Prabhupada.
Okay.
So that was the version that we studied.
Okay.
So we study shloka by shloka.
Okay.
And we interpret that shloka.
Okay.
I've also gone on to read, and I also think it's a very, very beautiful version of the Bhagavad Gita, is Paramhansa Yogananda's version.
Okay.
Right.
Of his purport. It's also a very, very beautiful explanation of it, and there are many explanations of how people interpret it.
It was originally in Sanskrit, right? I think.
Yes.
So we had a guest on the show earlier, in the earlier weeks, and she Eka Chaturvedi Banerjee,
Yes.
I think you know. And she was telling us that the Rig Veda is also written in Sanskrit.
Correct.
But if you take the translation literally, it means something completely different from if you really understand the language. And
like
then,
resistance in Sanskrit and resistance in science have two totally different meanings.
Completely different meanings.
Yeah.
Right.
Eka is an amazing soul and very, very knowledgeable and learned. So
Yeah, we had another amazing conversation with her as well regarding science and spirituality and where they come together.
Amazing.
So pretty similar to the one we're having right now. So on that note, we're going to take a short break.
Sure.
And we'll be right back to discuss a few more books.
Hey everybody, welcome to another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. If you're not following us on social media, please make sure you do. We're IVM Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Speaking of social media, one of the things that we really enjoy doing is we love seeing screenshots of people listening to our shows. So if you're listening to something and you want to let us know what you think about things, just take a screenshot, post it to Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, wherever, and tag us, and we'll tag you back, and we'll talk to you, and we'll let you know what we think of what you think. We'd also like to thank our sponsors for this month, Savari, Storytel, and Paytm Money. We really appreciate the support. Also, on another note, an IVM-related note, we're looking to hire. We're looking for producers, content creators, audio engineers, back-end developers. We're looking for somebody in the data specialist kind of space, graphic designers. We're looking for all different kinds of people. So if you want to join one of the best places to work there is out there, then send us an email to careers@indusvox.com with your resume, and we'll get back to you shortly. On the scene and the unseen, Amit Verma is in conversation with Suyash Rai of Carnegie India. Their conversation is about conservatism in India and the role of religion in society. On Business.next by Bloomberg Quint, host Govindraj Ethiraj is joined by the founder of The North Face, Hap Klopp. They discuss his journey of founding The North Face, the challenges, his road to success, and learnings along the way. On Not Just Dansak, Present talks to Chef Viraf Patel, who works predominantly with European food and has done plenty of experimentation with Parsi food. On Equity Sahiye, brought to you by Motilal Oswal AMC, Shrey Lunkar gives us deep insight into the Indian infrastructure and capital goods sector along with host Anupam Gupta. On Advertising is Dead, Varun is joined by Rupak Saluja, founder and CEO of the 120 Media Collective. He talks about the difference between working in an international media house and an Indian media house, the set of values followed by his company, and his experience working for Bollywood movies. On What a Player, Mikhail and Siddharth talk about the ongoing ICC Cricket World Cup and give their take on it along with their predictions. On Mr. and Mrs. Binge Watch, Janice and Anirudh talk about the true crime documentaries The Jinx and Making a Murderer. And with that, let's continue on with your show.
Welcome back, guys. We still have with us Shayamal Vallabhjee, and the book that we're going to discuss is the one that the extract was from, The Happiness Hypothesis by Jonathan Haidt. So, tell us a little bit about this book, Shayamal.
So, Happiness Hypothesis is a beautiful book. Jonathan Haidt studied a few different religions. He's a professor in philosophy.
Okay.
He studied Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity.
Okay.
And he found 10 principles that were common within all of them.
Okay.
So the book deep dives into, and he brings a lot of scientific validation between these principles.
Okay.
And he validates them. So it's a very beautiful book. If you're interested in philosophy, you don't really need to read scriptures. Books like this by Jonathan Haidt, and even my other book, The Biology of Belief, would sort of deep dive into the science of what religion speaks about.
Right. It sounds fascinating because just the initial thought you would have is that they're so bipolar, right? Science and religion.
Well, science is a religion.
Science is a religion.
And that's the reason why, if we approached it like that, there would be less wars.
Right.
The reason we find people fighting over religion is because we don't approach it as a science.
Okay.
We approach it as a philosophy, and as a philosophy you want to protect it, right? But when you look at science, I could bring a Jewish, a Hindu, a Muslim, a black, a Christian, a Japanese person, all on the table, and I tell them, I want you to find a scientific solution to something, and everyone would work peacefully.
Right.
Yeah.
But when I approach it like a philosophy, each person wants to get their point of view across.
Right.
Yeah.
So if we approach religion like a science, there would be less war.
Wow, that's a profound thought.
Yeah. There are two instances in this book which are really interesting to me. One is where he's talking about the brain being divided into two parts. And he talks about the basic instincts and, your intuitive personality. So the elephant and the rider, basically.
Correct,
so
yes.
would you, elaborate on
So
that?
Jonathan Haidt refers to, he's referring to the conscious and the subconscious mind.
Right.
Okay.
He calls the conscious mind the rider because it's a smaller part. The subconscious mind is the elephant.
Okay.
And the best way of how he describes it is that as a rider, you're on the elephant. Okay, so the conscious mind's on that subconscious mind. And for the better part of time, you think you're controlling it.
Yeah.
So you're asking it to go left and right, and it's going.
And it's going.
But that subconscious mind, if it wants to throw you and topple you and go in its own direction, you can do nothing to control it.
Yeah.
Right.
Because it's a larger mass that's literally controlling us. So the rider, for the better part, thinks he's in control of the elephant.
Yeah.
Okay, he's not really in control, but he can control it.
Right.
So the Jonathan Haidt constantly refers to the rider and the elephant,
Yeah.
and he looks at how we can use our conscious mind to reprogram our subconscious mind, because our subconscious mind is the driver behind every single thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So he beautifully explains that, and you'll find that analogy of rider elephant is consistent throughout the book with every single one of the principles that he brings to the table.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because I think it's like, the only thing that sort of makes you make rational civil decisions. So, a lot of times your mind could be telling you to do a lot of things, or, I don't want to be here, I don't want to behave in a certain fashion. Or like you mentioned that, when you were staying at the temple, you thought that you should respect the, lifestyle of the 9 people you're living with. So
Yes.
I think that's just the difference from, what you want to do and what your rational mind thinks is what you should be doing.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. As a psychologist, I constantly tell people that the subconscious mind is there to protect you.
Yeah.
There's a reason why you would look at 10,000 positive thoughts and you would remember that one negative thought.
Right.
Because that one negative thought is there to protect you.
Right.
If you're walking down the road, a dark alley, and you were eating an apple, and someone comes over and hits you on your head.
Yeah.
Okay. Every time you're eating an apple, you'll be scared. And every time you're walking down an alley, you'll be scared.
Yeah.
Now, the subconscious mind has got nothing wrong with the dark alley or nothing against an apple.
Yeah.
But these two mechanisms are ingrained triggers to protect you from going down a dark alley again, because it sees trouble there.
Yeah.
Right.
That's how it is. Now, we don't see it that way. We don't see what it's doing as a protective mechanism.
Yeah.
And we don't realize that the power to rewrite that program is within us.
Right. Absolutely.
And
that's what every book talks about, right? Getting over that fear and sort of like in the previous episode we were discussing paradoxal intention, which is basically letting your fears, so letting what you're fearing actually happen to you. So if you actually fear a dark alley, you should go down one, and then you'll realize that there's nothing really to fear.
Correct.
So it's actually
kind of like a reprogramming method to...
Yes, it was a theory brought to the forefront by Seneca. Seneca was a Stoic. He was a counselor, philosopher in the Roman times. Very, very with Socrates and Epictetus. All of these guys, they were very, very brilliant minds. And Stoicism is about living your fear. So whatever you fear, live it to the point where you wouldn't fear it anymore.
Exactly.
Right.
It's called Stoicism.
You explained it much better than me. But I was getting to that.
Yeah.
So and another thought which I really like in the book is the passionate love versus the companionate love, which is basically, trying to find a companion in life and not a passionate love, because that's something that is going to wear off with time.
So it's an interesting theory. What he's saying is that, and that's where he finds the flaw in most relationships, is that every relationship will start with passionate love, but passionate love will dwindle. And he describes it beautifully on a timeline. And there's a beautiful intersection point. It's that grey area between where these 2 points are intersecting. Okay. But most people don't give enough time to go past that intersection point, because if you wait long enough in that point of time, then compassion will take over. Support will take over. A loving relationship will take over. Because no matter who you are, right, the need for passion will dwindle, because the way you look and the way your body functions will change
over time.
Right.
So it's a beautiful theory that Jonathan brings to the table. It's not rocket science after all. We all know this, isn't it? We see this in our parents. Our parents are 60 years old. It's not passion. It's compassion.
It's compassion.
Isn't it?
It's sort of like...
We have living examples in front of us. We just are blinded to it.
Maybe we need to let love break us until we accept it fully, right?
Love is breaking us. We need to wait.
We need to wait through that, persevere.
Absolutely.
Persevere.
Great. So the next book that we're moving on to is Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton. So this book deals with the I'm a little... this is a little tough to describe, but I'm going to give it a shot. So it deals with the subconscious mind as... sort of emotion, as sort of biological...
So what Bruce is saying is that Bruce says that information is carried in two ways. Right. Information is carried in a hereditary form through your genes. And then he refers to the term epigenetics, which means that your environment can mold your genes. Okay. So we're saying that you cannot discount the environment you live in. It's actually altering how your genes work. And then he says for the longest time researchers believed that genes could not be altered, but the science of epigenetics proves that it can be altered. And then Bruce Lipton pretty much goes forward and he looks at how your thoughts can change your biology on a cellular level. And it's very simple. If you are not in the best version of your future self, your mind is sitting in the past version of your worst self. Because your mind will always default to something in the past, and the subconscious mind wants to protect you, so it will always default to a terrible incident in the past. Now, thought drives emotion. So if you're thinking about a breakup that happened previously, you're going to embody the emotion of that breakup. And when you understand and you embody the pain of that breakup, that pain will manifest in your body. So you'll start feeling it. You'll start feeling heart palpitations. You'll start feeling a knot in your stomach. You may want to cry. You may get shivers. You may pull yourself into isolation. Those are physical manifestations. So what's happening is you've moved yourself into the past. Now, Bruce is saying that if you wake up every single morning and you put yourself into the future best version of yourself. So if you wake up and you start thinking to myself that this is the life I want, and you start visualizing that life, you will start visualizing and you'll start feeling emotions according to that visualization. So for example, if I wake up every single morning and I think I am a New York Times best-selling author, if I say that every day, after 10 days, I will wake up feeling that. Okay, and when I feel that, my cells will start embodying that feeling.
Okay,
and that's the secret to life. Because the truth is that, it's a paradox, actually, that, even Shakespeare says this, beautifully. Things now are done, the soul just likes doing, which means that, the joy is in the process. The joy isn't in
the outcome.
Right. And that's why we're constantly disappointed, because we create perceptions around what we think. We think that if we get $1 million, we'll be happy.
Right.
And when we get $1 million,
you want 10 million.
Not happy.
So you're not happy.
Then we'll get 10 million and be happy.
We're there. But if you enjoy the process of accumulating that or getting that, you'll enjoy that process a lot more.
That's the real joy, actually. The path to get there.
Yeah.
If your objective is so impossible,
Absolutely.
I think the path, the more impossible it is, the more fulfilling it is when you sort of accomplish it, right?
That's what it is. So that's what he's speaking about. He's looking at the future best version of yourself versus the past version. And Bruce Lipton was brilliant in how he brings in a lot of scientific research to validate how your thoughts are changing your cell biology.
Right.
And we've got numerous, tons of research around this from people who've done studies where you're speaking to plants and you're looking at plants flourish when you speak to
when
them
you speak
kindly.
to them, or you sing to them sometimes.
Something loving or something kind, or when you're being harsh to a plant and you using vulgarity and being negative with it, how it'll die in 10 days' time. We're seeing the exact same thing. Japanese scientists have proven this with water molecules.
Water molecules,
as well.
I've seen that as well.
So exactly. So the evidence is humongous and the evidence is around us. What needs to happen is our awareness needs to increase.
Right. So by awareness, you mean our self-awareness of what the way we are behaving in general, or
by awareness, I mean, yes, your awareness is like this ball of energy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, that's what it is. And remember, if you think of awareness as this big ball of energy, or think of water. If you pour water into a garden, the weeds will grow and the plants will grow.
Yeah.
Right. Same with energy. Energy will make flourish wherever you put it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you put your energy towards thinking about something negative, negative things will flourish.
Right.
If you put energy towards thinking about something positive, positive things will flourish. You know? And actually it's beautiful how they speak. Bruce Lipton speaks of placebo and nocebo.
Okay.
Right. So placebo, everyone is familiar with the word placebo, which is what it's the positive effect of something.
Yeah.
Right. So you're saying, you know what? They're not taking a drug, but the person thought they took the drug and they had the positive impact of that drug.
It's literally what.
So it's a positive impact of a thought.
Of a thought.
Yeah.
So nocebo is, if we accept a placebo, why aren't we accepting a nocebo, which is the negative impact of that thought?
Right.
You know,
Right.
which is bigger, it's more prevalent.
Right.
Yeah.
Because our mind is just conditioned
So
that
if you're
way to
thinking negatively,
and the thought is manifesting.
You're healing yourself. You're hurting yourself.
hurting yourself.
Yeah.
Wow. Sounds like an extremely interesting book.
Yeah.
I think
It's a must read.
put it on my to
I think
read
all
list for
these
sure.
books have basically the thought that you can control your emotions. It's a choice, and it's
Correct.
being aware. Yeah.
Yeah. So the next book that we're moving on to is Satya Nadella's book, Hit Refresh.
Yeah.
It's of course the story of Microsoft and the third CEO of Microsoft. He was appointed in 2014.
Correct.
Microsoft has, in the last 5 years, if I might say, really refreshed their approach towards business. I think they've captured quite a large market share. I think they're the number one company right now.
Correct.
So,
It's a $1 trillion company.
$1 trillion company, yeah. So tell us a little bit about why Satya Nadella story
So that
stood
book
out.
appealed to me for none of the reasons that people would think it would. I know very little about technology.
Right.
I care very little about $1 trillion companies.
Right.
Or about game-changing CEOs.
Right.
The reason that book appealed to me is how the incident of his first child, who was born physically disabled because in utero asphyxiation happened. Okay. The child was born. And how, whilst he was thinking about how am I going to live my life moving forward with the child like this, his wife is thinking, what am I going to do to make this child's life better?
Yeah.
And that single moment opened his mind to how we need to build a world with empathy.
Right.
Yeah.
So that book, I love that book for only one reason, is because he speaks of how important it is to integrate empathy into every leadership style.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Satya beautifully explains that in CEO, C stands for culture.
Right.
How can you create a culture of excellence? You know, and he speaks of building cultures not just top down but bottom up as well.
Yeah.
Right.
And that was why I love that book. I love the book because, you know, when you have a leader of $1 trillion company who is telling you that the culture of an organization is most important, and he's telling you that you build products with empathy, then people will start listening. And there's a beautiful quote. He quotes a person, which I wrote down for you. It's quote by Tracy Kidder, who says, technology is nothing more than the collective souls of those who build it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay. It's a
That's beautiful.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
a beautiful quote.
Yeah.
So that's why I love the book. Hit Refresh is a must read. I must have probably gifted 150 copies of that book
Wow.
away.
Oh, wow.
Every person I meet who I want to give something to, I give them a copy of Hit Refresh, because what the world needs now more than anything else is empathy.
Absolutely.
I agree completely with you.
I think another
on
very
that front,
striking, feature of this book is that he speaks about a lot of. So, of course, in addition to, the company's culture and empathy, he talks about unlearning as a process, which I think is beautiful.
Yes.
Where he says that, we're all conditioned to believe that, this is how the world works or this is how the market works. And your first learning is unlearning.
Correct.
So that you get out of, the box that you've been living in. And,
Totally.
yeah.
Satya's background is he obviously loved the game of cricket as well. So I'm a little biased towards him because I obviously love cricket as well. But what's one thing that's common with any person who plays sport, or any CEO or any executive leader who's very attuned with sport, is the ability to unlearn is in the fabric of who they are.
Yeah.
Because in sport, that's what you learn. You learn something, you got to unlearn it because someone else knows what you're doing.
Yeah.
You got to unlearn it.
Right.
And you got to learn something else.
Yeah.
Right.
You understand?
So that
And we
they
do this
don't-
on a
yeah.
day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
So when you play sport, which is such a massive part of Satya's life, is that unlearning and failure are two things that are ingrained into your fabric.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, since you mentioned, do tell us how you apply all of your learnings up to now as a sports scientist.
That's a very difficult question. When I work with the athletes and I work with across numerous sports, across numerous executives,
Yeah.
my entire goal is how can I make this person the best version of themselves?
Okay.
So I'm not a outcome-based person.
Okay.
When I work with someone, I'm not interested in whether we go on and win a medal or whether we don't, because the life of an athlete is very short.
Yeah.
Right. My job is to make sure that I can instill in them compassion, love, sincerity. I can instill in them a higher purpose, a power of self-transcendence that makes them think about the society and community larger than them.
Yeah.
Because if they happen to make it, and they happen to make it big, they're going to be in a wonderful position to create a large amount and a vast amount of impact in this world.
Yeah.
Okay, so I see my role as very important in sowing the seeds that makes him conscious enough
Yeah.
to go into that world and make a greater impact. So if we look at, I can give you and talk about the physiology of what I try to do and the psychology and those techniques, but at the foundation of what I'm doing is I'm trying to make that person a better version of themselves.
Yeah, that's beautiful, and I'm sure books play a huge role in that, because I just feel there's so much knowledge, and we need someone to streamline it for us, and I think that's what books do. So
Yeah, and speaking about books, you've written 4 books yourself.
yes,
So can you tell us a little bit about these books?
These books were, most of them are training books. The first book that I actually wrote...
They're all around cricket, right?
Most of them are around cricket,
of them are around cricket.
The first one I wrote is called Cricket IQ.
Okay.
It was published in 2003, together with a few colleagues of mine who are doctors. The book's out of circulation. You can get a few copies at university.
Okay.
It was very heavy with science, so we actually didn't even sell 100 copies.
Okay.
Right, because it was so heavy that no one could understand it. But it went on to become a university textbook.
Oh,
right?
okay. Wow.
So it's packed with research on biomechanics. It's packed on research on sports vision.
Okay.
I had colleagues like Professor Tim Noakes, who everyone understands, who was a founder of the Banting high-fat diet. Then I have Professor Richard Stretch. Professor Richard is late now, but he was the founder of cricket biomechanics. He looked at fast bowling mechanics, and he was the creator of what was called fast bowling guidelines, which meant that at different age groups, how much should a fast bowler bowl at different age groups.
What speed should they?
Not speed.
Okay.
The workload. So how many balls or overs should he bowl to prevent a condition called pars articulus, or pars interarticulus, which is a stress fracture of the lower back, which is a very common injury in fast bowlers.
Okay.
So
from overexertion.
From overexertion, correct. So Richard was there. Then a very dear friend of mine, Professor Kovan Naidu, wrote on sports vision training for cricket. So we had about 10-15 doctors contribute to Cricket IQ. Wow. That, like I said, it's a beautiful book. If anyone can ever get their hands on it and you love cricket, you will be mind blown by the amount of research we've done. The next book, I realized I had to dumb it down. So I created what's called the Handbook of Cricket Drills, which was really simple. Okay. It was so simple anyone could understand. It had about 200 training drills. Okay. Right. So all you had to know was what you want to train. So if you want to get faster, you open to faster and drills to make you faster. You want to get stronger, it had drills to make you stronger. Nice. And stuff like that. And then I did a revised edition of that, and now I published a book called Lessons from the Wild, which was a motivation book. Okay. So I'm a big fan of wildlife, coming from South Africa, obviously. Yeah. So I studied the migratory patterns and the behavior patterns of animals in the wild, and I looked at what were the lessons that we can learn from them. So also a very, very simple book, take you about 2 hours to read. Okay. But we looked at 20 different animals, and what were the lessons that we can learn from them in that. And
it's a very interesting topic. I don't think anyone has ever broached something like this.
I'm sure somebody has. Have they? Big statement to say no one has.
It's the first time I've heard of it. So great, and really kudos to you, like overcoming the barriers put in front of you for your cricketing career, and it's obviously you've overcome it in a certain way that you have books, you've written books on cricket, so really kudos for that. I mean,
thank you.
I feel really bad that you didn't get to represent your country in the sport, but
I think no, I think there's nothing to feel bad about. I think it's how
getting to mold the lives of many who are playing the sport.
This is a bigger game.
I think everything happens
bigger
for a
impact.
reason. Exactly.
Now you're having a much bigger impact on the game,
on the game and
players.
The sport and as such. And it's the stories we have to. Maybe these are the stories that mold us into who we are and allow us to then move forward and forge forward in some shape and form. Yeah.
Wow.
Awesome. I feel very calm at the end of this episode.
So thank you so much, Shayamal, for being on the show today.
Thank you very much.
And we look forward to having you again. Maybe when your next book is out, we'll have you again on the show.
Sure. Thank you very much.
And a big thank you to all our listeners. You can follow the Open Library Project on LinkedIn, Instagram and Facebook for latest updates on our events, and stay tuned for the next Paperback podcast on IVM Podcasts. Happy reading. You can follow IVM Podcasts on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at IVM Podcasts. Listen to Paperback on the IVM Podcast app, website, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Advertising is dead. Yep, you heard me right. Advertising is dead. We're all in the content business now. Let's not call it news, TV, radio, etc., etc. It's all content, and we're in the middle of this weirdly exciting phase where all the borders and lines that have been drawn over decades has been swept away by this lovely thing called the internet. We're a show where we don't dwell on just the stuff that is now, but rather the wider stuff about advertising, media, content, and the whole goddamn circus surrounding it. Tune in every Tuesday for our weekly unboxing of the mystery box we used to call advertising. I'm Varun Dugirala, co-founder and content chief at The Glitch, and this is my new podcast, Advertising is Dead.
Hey Meghnad, do you know how to citizen?
Hey Shreyas, do you know how to citizen?
Hey Meghnad, do you know how to citizen?
Hey Shreyas, let's just do a podcast about it.
Let's do a podcast about it. A podcast is called How to Citizen. In every episode, we get a new guest and discuss one chapter from the 8th grade civics textbook. Think about it as three friends revising before a test, and we go back to school. There's nostalgia, there's trauma, there are lunch breaks, there are favorite teachers, there are horrible teachers, there's everything.
So every Tuesday, we bring in a guest on the podcast and we ask them a very simple question. Do you know how to citizen?
Meghnad, I think the question is, do you know how to citizen?
But Shreyas, I'm asking you this question.